Admiral Zalthor Vrax stood alone in the dim war chamber, the circular walls pulsing with cold blue light as streams of tactical footage played around him. None of the displays made sense. They never did when humans were involved. He fixed his gaze on one particular recording, slowing it frame by frame. A human cruiser, primitive by Vexorian standards, was locked between two converging plasma cannons. The beams should have crushed it. Instead, the ship flickered, blurring as if reality had hiccuped. A flash, a smear of distortion, and the cruiser appeared 600 meters to the left, untouched. Vrax's pupils tightened to thin, furious lines. "Freeze," he ordered. The hollow froze with the human vessel mid-phase, its hull both solid and translucent. It looked wrong, an insult to physical order. The Vexorian Dominion prided itself on rules, structure, predictable motion. Humans treated the universe like a challenge they were determined to bully into compliance. Vrax exhaled through his fangs. No natural species moves through locked space. His second-in-command approached cautiously. "Admiral, these are the raw logs extracted from the outrun engagement. Their targeting systems failed the moment the humans executed that maneuver." That was not a maneuver. Vrax's claws clicked against the metal floor. It was defiance. The officer hesitated. "What shall we tell the Dominion Council?" Vrax turned slowly, his crest rising. "Tell them humanity has begun rewriting the rules, and if we do not act, they will rewrite the galaxy next." He dismissed the officer with a wave, then stared at the frozen image again. What unsettled him wasn't the movement, but the calmness of the human captain recorded afterward. Humans faced impossible odds without fear. They improvised. They laughed. They broke things that should not be broken. They had to be contained. He opened a star map. Red zones flared across the Orion spur, each marking a human outpost expanding into space the Dominion once considered its own. The humans had already rescued a species under Vexorian influence. That alone was a challenge. But these propulsion anomalies? That was a threat. Vrax keyed in commands with deliberate precision. "Prepare the outer defense ring. Every fortress. Every cruiser. I want nothing left to chance." Across the chamber, automated systems roared to life. "This time," Vrax murmured, "the humans will not slip through our claws." Captain Arya Holt leaned over the fold-slip drive housing, listening to the machine groan as though it were alive. Sparks drifted from a half-open panel before a technician slapped it back into place. "Chief," Arya said, "is it supposed to sound like it's complaining?" Chief Engineer Mendez laughed. "Captain, this engine would file a formal protest if it knew how. But it'll hold." "That's what you said last time." "Last time it did hold," Mendez replied. "Mostly." Arya shook her head, amused despite the tension building across the frontier. The HSS Dauntless was humanity's boldest attempt at making the fold-slip drive more than a long-range FTL system. Microslips, short, controlled skips inside gravity wells, were considered suicidal by every species that had studied them. Humans saw suicidal as promising. She ran a hand along the edge of the casing. The metal hummed faintly. "If physics starts screaming, let me know." "Oh, trust me," Mendez said. "You'll hear it before I do." Arya left engineering with a smirk, but her smile faded as soon as she entered the bridge. A message from Fleet Command waited at the center console. She already knew it wouldn't be cheerful. Lieutenant Cade straightened. High Command marked it urgent. Arya opened the transmission. A senior admiral appeared, expression grim. "Captain Holt, the Vexorian Dominion has mobilized their third star failing. Their admiral, Zalthor Vrax, claims humanity's propulsion experiments destabilize strategic balance." Arya raised an eyebrow. "He believes our engines are a threat?" "He believes your ship is a violation of nature." The admiral leaned closer. "We want peace, but we cannot condone their treatment of the species you helped evacuate. Your diplomatic clearance stands, but understand the stakes. If Vrax fires first, you defend the frontier. Prevent war if possible. Stop them if they force our hand. The transmission ended. Silence settled briefly over the bridge. Cade spoke first. So, they think we broke physics again. Arya exhaled slowly. We didn't break anything. We just bent it in new directions. Admiral Vrax doesn't sound like the bending type, Cade muttered. Arya agreed internally. Vrax had a reputation. Brilliant tactician, rigid worldview, absolute control. Anything unpredictable angered him. Humans were unpredictable by definition. She brought up the star charts. The outer defense ring glowed at the border. Set course. Best speed. The helmsman nodded. Aye, Captain. Estimating arrival in 24 hours. Arya studied the map as if she could see the Vexorian fleet forming behind it. Vrax was not deploying a defensive ring, he was building a trap. The Dominion would not risk direct war unless they believed they could sever humanity's advance in one decisive strike. She turned to her crew. We attempt diplomacy first. If Vrax wants to talk, we talk. If he wants a display, she glanced toward engineering. We show him what the Dauntless can do. Mendez's voice came through the comm, Captain. Before you make promises on behalf of my engine, a reminder. The slip core is experimental. Push it too hard, and we may find out what happens when a drive tries to tear itself in half. That's why we'll avoid pushing it. That's what you said last time. Arya allowed herself a soft laugh. Prepare it anyway. She closed the channel and headed toward her private viewport. Stars drifted by in quiet clusters, gentle compared to the chaos she knew awaited them. She wasn't afraid of Vrax. She wasn't afraid of his fortresses or his precision fleet. What worried her was miscalculation. The wrong word, the wrong signal, a misunderstanding spiraling into a war neither side truly wanted. But humans had made a promise to the rescued species. That promise mattered. If Vexorians tried to force humanity backward, they would discover why humans were no longer considered newcomers to the galaxy. Cade approached quietly. Captain, do you believe Vrax will negotiate? Arya kept her eyes on the stars. I believe he'll try to control the situation. If he thinks he can intimidate us, he'll press. If he realizes he can't, she paused. He'll panic. And panicked admirals make dangerous choices. You really think he fears us? He fears what he can't predict. She tapped the viewport. Humans are very difficult to predict. The bridge lights dimmed as the Dauntless entered the stretch toward Vexorian territory. Arya straightened, shoulders squared, resolve sharpening. Bring the fold slip drive to ready state. And inform the crew. Diplomatic engagement at arrival. Aye, Captain. Arya took her seat. Let's go meet the Dominion. The stars elongated, space rippled, and the Dauntless surged forward toward the waiting storm. The Vexorian outer defense ring emerged from the fold-slip haze like a serrated crown across the stars. Dozens of fortified bastions formed an enormous arc, cold, silent, mathematically perfect. Each fortress radiated enough firepower to flatten a small moon. Together, they created a battlefield shaped with surgical intent. Captain Arya Holt studied the formation as the Dauntless decelerated from its slipstream. He's not hiding his intentions, she murmured. Lieutenant Cade ran diagnostics, brow furrowing. Admiral Vrax positioned his entire phalanx behind the ring. He's daring us to approach. He wants us inside the kill zone, Arya said. No one questioned the obvious. Every officer on the bridge felt the tension humming through the consoles. The Vexorian Dominion never arranged defenses this aggressively unless preparing for decisive action. Open a diplomatic channel, Arya ordered. Static briefly filled the air before the holographic form of Admiral Zalthor Vrax materialized above the central table. His posture was rigid, scales reflecting the fortress lights. Captain Holt, Vrax said, voice flat, you cross into restricted space. This is neutral territory, Arya replied evenly. We're here to discuss the escalating tensions and your fleet's mobilization. There is nothing to discuss, Vrax said. Humanity conducts experiments that endanger the stability of controlled space. Your fold-slip technology disrupts conventional physics. We demand full access to its schematics for safety review. Cade muttered under his breath, safety review. Sure. Arya ignored him. Admiral, surrendering our propulsion systems isn't an option. But we're willing to establish a joint commission to address your concerns. Vrax leaned forward. You refuse compliance. Humanity doesn't yield its innovations under threat, Arya said. But we prefer peace. Her calm tone only sharpened his frustration. His crest stiffened. Peace requires predictability. You offer chaos wrapped in politeness. Arya recognized the warning signs. He was losing patience. Admiral, we propose dialogue, not hostility. Dialogue. His voice thinned. You violate the laws that bind space. You treat reality as if it is clay. Tell me, Captain, do you even understand what your engines do? We understand them enough to use them responsibly. Vrax's eyes narrowed. Responsibility is irrelevant if the universe breaks. Before Arya could speak, Vrax's image flickered. A targeting lock alarm pulsed across the bridge. They're painting us, Cade said, hands flying over controls. Arya lifted a hand. Steady. Hold position. A bright flare erupted from a fortress battery. One shot, a deliberate test. Brace for impact. Cade shouted. Microslip now, Arya snapped. The bridge lights jerked sideways as the Dauntless flickered. A brief distortion warped the air around them. The stars shifted violently, then steadied with the ship now drifting several hundred meters from its original position. Gasps broke across Vexorian channels. Even through static, alien officers could be heard shouting. Vrax reappeared, eyes widened. You moved through a locked firing solution. You fired without provocation, Arya said. That was a calibration beam, Vrax spat. Not intended to hit. His composure weakened. Your movement cannot be modeled. Arya kept her tone neutral. We prefer to avoid damage. If we can demonstrate stability. Demonstrate. Vrax cut her off. His crest twitched in disbelief. You flaunt your aberrations openly. Another alarm sounded. Gravity well surge, Cade warned. They activated a confinement field. One of the star fortresses pulsed with focused energy, creating a gravitational ridge meant to drag the Dauntless inward. The ship rattled gently as invisible forces pressed against its hull. Mendez's voice burst through the calm. Captain, they're trying to pin us. If that field tightens, we'll lose maneuvering. Arya saw it instantly. Vrax wasn't escalating. He was experimenting, testing, probing her ship for weaknesses. She refused to be caged. Helm, gravity surf on my mark. The helmsman blinked. Captain, that ridge is unstable. Exactly. We ride the edge. He swallowed hard. On your mark. Now. The Dauntless angled into the ridge. Space pulled sharply, threatening to crush them, but the helmsman held the trajectory. The ship skimmed along the sheer, gathering momentum instead of collapsing into the pull. The hull vibrated, but stabilized. From the Vexorian perspective, the maneuver looked suicidal. Alarms blared across their channels as their confinement algorithms scrambled. Arya watched their reactions with clinical focus. Release the ridge, she transmitted. This conflict is avoidable. Vrax stared at her as if confronting a monster made of equations he had never studied. What you just executed is not survivable by known species. It's survivable by mine, Arya said gently. Her reassurance only tightened the tension. Vrax bared his fangs. You twist gravitational collapse into propulsion. You play with forces that would annihilate us. Admiral, Arya said, we are not here to harm you. You exist as harm, Vrax whispered. His flagship shifted formation. Every fortress rotated its guns inward. Cade's voice dropped. He's locking the entire ring onto us. Arya saw the truth in Vrax's eyes. He wasn't bluffing. She straightened. Admiral, Firing on a Federation vessel will trigger war. Then let history record this moment. His final words trembled. The moment we attempted to defend order. The hologram cut off. Red lights swept across the Dauntless bridge. He's committed, Cade said. All batteries charging. Mendez broke through the comm again. Captain, the drive is heating from back-to-back microslips. We need time to cool the reactors or we risk meltdown. Noted, Arya said quietly. She surveyed the ring of fortresses closing in, precision geometry sealing like the jaws of a mechanized predator. She understood Vrax now. He feared what he couldn't predict, and nothing terrified him more than humans doing what should be impossible. Battle stations, Arya said. Defensive posture only. Alarms synchronized into a steady heartbeat. The ship dimmed into combat lighting. Cade turned to her. Captain, what now? Arya locked her harness as the Vexorian fleet advanced. Now, she said, we show them we didn't come here to die. The first barrage ignited the void. The first Vexorian barrage streaked toward the HSS Dauntless in a storm of plasma arcs and kinetic spears. The bridge vibrated under the force of the shockwaves, though the initial hits never touched the hull. Arya had already moved the ship out of perfect alignment, offsetting their lock by fractional micro-adjustments. It wasn't elegant, but it kept them alive. Shields at 85. Cade reported, recalibrating quickly. Keep us unpredictable, Arya said. The helmsman nodded, hands a blur across the console. Micro-adjustments shifting every second. Another volley cut across the starfield, striking only vacuum. Vexorian targeting systems were designed to predict opponent trajectories. The Dauntless didn't follow trajectories. It lurched, drifted, and pivoted in patterns no algorithm could anticipate. In the Vexorian command ship, Admiral Vrax watched the battlefield with rising panic. Human movements appeared on his tactical display as erratic jumps and shimmering distortions. His officers scrambled. Admiral, their velocity vectors are meaningless. They break pattern every time we establish correlation. They are not following any logical sequence, another officer cried. Vrax slammed a claw against the console. All ships, tighten formations and suppress their angles. They must exhaust their impossible techniques eventually. He didn't believe that. Nothing about the humans fit the framework the Dominion trusted. Order demanded boundaries. Humans moved past them as if boundaries were suggestions. Vrax tried to steady his breathing, but every flicker of the human vessel made the spines along his neck twitch. Back on the Dauntless, the battle intensified. The ship rolled left as a cluster of torpedoes detonated nearby. Mendez yelled over the comm, Captain, the fold-slip core is building heat fast. These micro-shifts stress the containment rings. How long until critical? Arya asked. Minutes if we're lucky. Less if they box us in. Arya steadied herself. We'll avoid that. Another wave of plasma surged across the screen. The helmsman pushed the ship into a sharp tilt, the gravity stabilizers groaning. Cade braced himself. They're tightening the ring. They're trying to force us into predictable lanes. Of course they are, Arya said. They want us cornered. The truth settled in her chest like a stone. Her normal evasive tactics couldn't hold forever. Eventually, they'd need the fold-slip drive at full capacity, something she'd hoped to avoid. The ship wasn't built for prolonged mid-battle slips, and the experimental modifications only made the risk greater. A direct hit rocked the Dauntless. The lights flickered. Shields at 60. Cade called. We can't keep absorbing this. Arya made a decision. Helm, angle 43 degrees. Prepare for partial slip. The helmsman hesitated. Captain, we've never tested partial integration under fire. Then today's our first. He swallowed but obeyed. On your mark. Arya waited until the Vexorian flagship fired another saturation volley. Mark. The fold core whined, a deep metallic resonance crawling through the hull. Space around the Dauntless shimmered as the ship flickered in and out of phase. The barrage tore through the empty coordinates the ship had just occupied. The Dauntless rematerialized several kilometers above its prior position. The maneuver worked at a cost. Sparks burst from the auxiliary conduit. The deck lurched. Mendez's strained voice crackled through the comm. "Captain, the core is destabilizing. You pull that stunt again, and the drive might eat itself." "It bought us breathing room," Arya said calmly. "It bought us a migraine," Mendez grumbled. "That core is screaming." Arya understood the implications. Fold-slip engines didn't physically scream, but when containment integrity dropped, the resonant frequencies vibrated through the hull. It had unnerved more than one engineer in early testing. The next wave of attacks approached. "Helm," Arya said. "Adjust pattern, 3-step drift, minimal slip." "Yes, Captain." The helmsman executed a zigzag that broke 2 targeting locks. But the enemy was adapting. Vexorian ships adjusted firing sequences, laying down overlapping field. The fortress cannons modified intervals to catch areas evasions. On the Vexorian bridge, Vrax's breathing quickened. "They are faltering. Their movements slow. Press the advantage." His officers obeyed instantly. The Dauntless shook again, harder this time. Cade shouted, "Hull plating holding, but barely." Arya steadied herself on the railing. "We hold position here. We can't slip again until the core stabilizes." "Captain," Cade warned, "they're forming a trilateral entrapment." Arya studied the holographic display. The Vexorian fleet was constructing a tight net of converging lines, forcing the Dauntless into a predictable space corridor. "They're planning something," she said softly. A cold realization followed. Vrax wasn't simply trying to overwhelm them. He was shaping the battlefield for a specific weapon. Mendez confirmed her suspicion. "I'm reading a gravitational surge building across the ring. Something massive." Then the space around the ship twisted. Gravity swelled without warning. The stars bent into elongated streaks. The hull moaned as invisible pressure clamped onto the Dauntless like a vice. "Graviton net!" Cade yelled. "They activated a containment superweapon." Arya gripped the console. "Helm, break free." "I can't," he replied. "It's pulling us from every vector. We're pinned." Alarms erupted. The core's resonance escalated into a grinding howl. Mendez screamed over the channel, "Captain, if the net tightens, the slip core will fail catastrophically." Arya opened a direct channel to the Vexorian flagship. Vrax appeared instantly, eyes bright with triumph and dread. "Your ship is trapped. The graviton net disrupts any slip attempt. You cannot escape now." "Vrax," Arya said, calm but firm, "this will destroy both our fleets. Disengage." "You bend reality," Vrax hissed. "I restore order. There is no other path. You don't have to do this." His voice softened, not with mercy, but with fear sharpened into resolve. "If we allow your kind to advance, the dominion of logic ends." His image vanished. The gravitational pressure increased. Arya turned to her crew. "Prepare for controlled fold-slip overload." Mendez's outrage blasted through the comm. "Captain, no. That's not a solution. That's an experiment with no data. If we do nothing, we're crushed." Silence spread across the bridge. Fear, acceptance, determination all settling into place. Cade exhaled shakily. "How long can we hold the overload before the containment ruptures?" 3 seconds, Mendez replied. 4 if the universe is in a good mood. Arya stepped forward. "Then we make 3 count." The helmsman nodded reluctantly. "Ready when you are." Arya placed her hand on the command panel. "Activate overload." The fold core roared, deep, violent, shaking the ship as if space itself were screaming. Lights dimmed. The hull flickered. The Dauntless slipped halfway out of reality, phasing between layers of space like a ghost. "Hold it!" Arya shouted. The ship shuddered violently. The gravitational pressure snapped. The graviton net ruptured. A shockwave rippled outward. Arya forced her voice through the chaos. Reintegrate now. The Dauntless slammed back into full existence, thrown free from the collapsing field. Breaths filled the bridge, unsteady, shaken, alive. Arya wiped sweat from her brow. Status. Cade stared at the display, stunned. We broke the net. The Dauntless steadied itself in open space, free of the collapsing graviton net. Smoke drifted from shattered panels. Sparks flickered overhead. But the ship was intact, battered, strained, still breathing. Arya surveyed the chaos as her crew caught their breath. Cade wiped blood from his brow. Captain, they're stunned. Their entire formation is off balance. Arya nodded. They didn't expect us to survive. We used that. Across the field, Vexorian ships struggled to compensate for the shockwave. Some drifted without control. Others attempted to reorient, but the sudden collapse of the net had thrown their systems into disarray. Arya opened comms. Engineering, report. Mendez answered with exhausted triumph. Drives damaged. Half the rings are warped. Containment is fragile but stable. Don't ask for another overload unless you want an explosion. We won't push it, Arya said. That's what you always say, Mendez muttered, then cut the channel. Arya turned to the tactical screen. The Vexorian flagship still floated at the center of the disrupted phalanx, weapons flickering as energy grids rebooted. Admiral Vrax had built the perfect trap, only to have it shattered by the very unpredictability he feared. Cade glanced at her. Orders. No killing. Arya pointed at the flagship. Disable their command structure. After that, we talk. He nodded. Targeting arrays online. Firing non-lethal payload. A series of EMP torpedoes streaked toward the flagship. They detonated around the vessel in bursts of white-blue light. Systems across the Vexorian command ship flickered and died. Its shields collapsed, weapons shut down, engines froze. The roar of the battle faded into a strange, heavy silence. Arya opened a direct link. Admiral Vrax, your flagship is disabled. Your fleet is outmaneuvered. I request to speak. Static crackled, then Vrax's image appeared. His scales were dimmer, his posture rigid but shaken. You destroyed the graviton net, Vrax whispered. No vessel has escaped it in recorded history. Arya kept her tone calm. We didn't destroy your fleet. We only broke the weapon holding us. You could have annihilated us, he said. Why didn't you? Arya stepped closer to the display. Because strength isn't measured by destruction. It's measured by control. If we escalate into a full war, both our civilizations burn. Vrax shook his head slowly. Your engines twist reality. Your pilots act without regard for consequence. You call this restraint. You see chaos, Arya replied, but what you're seeing is adaptability. Humans survive by doing what others fear to attempt. Vrax's eyes narrowed. You speak of survival, yet you advance across the stars as if claiming them. We expand, Arya said, because space is vast and empty. That doesn't mean we seek to dominate. We protect those who need it. That's why we rescued the species under your authority. They were suffering. That was internal governance, Vrax growled softly. Not when it becomes cruelty, Arya countered. Humanity can't ignore that. Silence stretched between them. Vrax finally asked, voice raw, what do you want? Recognition, Arya said. Dialogue. Cooperation. The chance to prove that our technology isn't a threat to your existence. His crest lowered, not in submission, but in exhaustion. You break the rules. You disregard the limits every other species accepts. We don't disregard them, Arya said. We learn from them. Then we push past them. Vrax looked away as if wrestling with a truth he didn't want to see. Your unpredictability terrifies us. Arya softened her tone. Fear doesn't have to lead to war. The comm display flickered as power struggled to hold on his end. If I agree to stand down, Vrax said, my council will say I failed. If you continue, Arya replied, your council will lose ships, officers, and territory. You'll fail far worse. He breathed out slowly, the weight of command settling heavily over him. What guarantee do I have that humanity will not exploit this victory? Arya answered simply. Our actions. Vrax studied her for a long moment. For the first time, his eyes held not fear, but something closer to understanding. You are unlike any species we've faced, he murmured. We hear that often, Arya said gently. He gave a slow nod. Very well. I will order my fleet to stand down. In exchange, I expect your people to enter formal diplomatic review. That was always our intention. The channel closed. The starfield grew quiet as Vexorian vessels powered down their weapons. Arya's crew exhaled in relief. Cade let himself slump into his chair. Captain, I think we just prevented sector-wide war. Let's not celebrate yet, Arya said. We still have to convince two governments we didn't start this. Mendez reconnected with weary sarcasm. Tell the diplomats to credit the engine. It screamed loud enough to earn applause. Arya laughed, the tension finally cracking. I'll put that in the report. The bridge crew shared soft chuckles, half relief, half disbelief. They'd survived a confrontation meant to be fatal. And more astonishingly, they'd ended it without annihilation. Arya gave the order. Begin post-battle analysis. Prioritize damage control. Prepare a channel for the Federation. Cade nodded. Captain, Vrax will remember this. I hope he remembers the restraint, Arya said. Hours later, with emergency repairs underway, Arya stepped into the quiet observation deck. The stars shone undisturbed by the battle that had nearly torn them apart. She let her hand rest against the cool glass. Humanity had climbed from a single fragile world into a galaxy terrified of the possibilities humans represented. And today proved why. Not because of violence, but because of the will to survive without losing themselves. Footsteps approached. Cade joined her. We did the impossible again. We do that often, Arya replied. Doesn't it scare you sometimes? Every time, she said honestly. But fear isn't a cage. It's a compass. Cade absorbed that quietly. What do you think Vrax will tell his council? That humans can break their weapons, Arya said, and choose not to break their people. Cade smiled faintly. That's very HFY of us. Arya looked out at the starlight, her reflection dim among the constellations. Let them fear our ships if they must. We'll show them they have nothing else to fear from us. The Dauntless drifted forward, engines humming like a heartbeat, scarred, resilient, ready for whatever unknown horizon awaited. Humanity wasn't done surprising the galaxy. Not even close.